Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Population Health and Wellbeing series on Nutrition Reimagined, Science-Backed Strategies for Optimum Health. Your cameras and microphones are turned off. Use the chat or the Q&A features to type questions or comments. Questions will be addressed at the end of the session. This session is accredited both by the ACCME and the DHP for a maximum of 1 credit or 1 hour. And the evaluation will be available by this Thursday on your Cloud CME account, that is May 21st. Healthcare practitioners who are licensed in Qatar will only receive their credits when the correct QID and MOPH license number is provided on your Cloud CME portal. You will receive an email that the evaluation is now available. And then once you complete that evaluation, you are able to download your certificates. All right, so it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker this evening, Dr. Ravinder Mamtani, Professor of Population Health Sciences, Professor of Medicine at the Center for Global Health, and the Vice Dean for Population Health and Lifestyle Medicine at Weill Cornell Medicine-Qatar. Dr. Mamtani is also a Professor of Community and Family Medicine adjunct at the New York Medical College in New York. Dr. Mamtani is a leading voice in advancing population health, preventive medicine, lifestyle medicine, with a commitment to translating scientific evidence into practical strategies that support healthier lives. He has many years of clinical experience, including at Westchester Medical Center in New York, in utilizing complementary and lifestyle therapies to treat chronic diseases. He has many publications in peer-reviewed journals. Dr. Mamtani is a member of the prestigious New York State Board for Professional Medical Conduct, Vice Chair for the Lifestyle Medicine Global Alliance, and a diplomate of the American Board of Preventive Medicine in the specialties of preventive medicine, public health, and occupational medicine. Dr. Mamtani is also US board certified in both integrative medicine and lifestyle medicine. Today's session invites us to rethink nutrition not simply as diet advice, but as a science-backed and clinically relevant approach to promoting health and preventing disease. We look forward to hearing from Dr. Mamtani's expertise and insights. Dr. Mamtani, thank you so much for being with us today. Over to you.
Raji, thank you for that kind introduction. It is my pleasure to share my thoughts on nutrition. And what I'll do in the next 45 minutes is to talk about three things. I'll talk about the principles of a healthy diet, and then I'll share with the audience the scientific evidence on the role of nutrition to promote health and prevent disease. And then finally, I will outline a practical approach to integrating nutrition in healthcare. And in making these remarks under Learning Objective 3, I may use illustrations from use of supplements, alcohol use, ultra-processed foods, and also perhaps address some common nutrition myths. So, as an employee of Weill Cornell Medical College, I have nothing to disclose, no disclosures. So let's begin with this. This was something that appeared in the Journal of American Medical Association about a couple of years ago. And if you see, this is the life expectancy. And as we can see, life expectancy has been going up. Currently, we live on average about 73 years. If you were to adjust this life expectancy with health, make an adjustment for health, you end up getting what is known as health span. So we have lifespan on the one hand, 73 in 2019, and health span of 63 years in 2019. Lifespan gain as can be seen, has not been matched by gain in the health span. There is a significant difference between the two, a difference of approximately 10 years. Um, this gap is due to chronic diseases and their dominance and associated disabilities, pain, and suffering that goes with these chronic illnesses. Now, one would have thought that if you were to compare this with 2000, where the gap was 8.5 years and currently 9.6, close to 10 years, you would have expected, with all the advances that are happening, that this health span would have probably gone in this direction, narrowing the gap. But that has not happened, as can be seen. The gap of 8.5 years has been widened and is currently around 9.6 or 10 years. And as I said, this gap is due to chronic disease dominance and the associated challenges that go with it. So here are some characteristics of chronic diseases. Since I mentioned chronic disease dominance, I think it may be appropriate for me to talk about the characteristics of chronic diseases. About 70 to 80% of people, of all the deaths that occur on this planet, occur due to chronic illnesses. Examples are cancer, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, and so on and so forth. But here are the features of this trend. One is that chronic diseases kill prematurely. People are dying earlier than they should be and result in quite many disabilities that we see in chronic illnesses. Chronic illnesses also are a reason for chronic pain, depression, and widespread misery. And the third point is even more striking, which is many people who suffer from these illnesses are not aware that they're suffering from these illnesses. And a case in point is the presence of diabetes. It is believed about 25 to 40% of people with diabetes do not know that they have diabetes. How can that be? Something is wrong somewhere. Our healthcare system is failing us. For us not to be able to recognize diabetes among those who have diabetes is not appropriate. And finally, the prevalence of chronic illnesses has been going up. And here's a case in point. These are the trends for obesity, as can be seen from 1970 onwards in all high-income nations, many high-income nations. The trend is it's going up. It's not even plateauing. Never mind the decrease. It's not even plateauing, but it has been going up. And there was a recent Yahoo news article which said, if this trend continues, and in fact, the title is New Obesity Research Shows 100% of Americans could be overweight by 2048. Well, this is America, but this would also apply to many high-income nations around the world, including Europe. And that, to me, is a very disturbing trend. Here is something that I think appeared in the Lancet. It was an essay written by Dr. Vijaya Singham, who suffers from chronic illnesses called multiple sclerosis. And I want to read what Dr. Lamania said. I do not want to be limited by my health condition. I want to be independent. I want to be a valuable contributor to my family, community, and society. I want to be chronically well, not chronically ill. And here is something that lays the emphasis on living well despite increase in longevity. And I think she writes this well. And for us to be aware that I think while we are living longer, it's equally important for us to live a longer life, but with good quality of life, free of any impairment, free of disabilities, and so on. So the next question then arises is, what are the risk factors that contribute to chronic disease? And here's a listing of that. And as you can see, this compares what we saw in 1990 as compared to 219, 2019. And here are those factors: blood pressure, tobacco, dietary risk, glucose levels, high body mass index, obesity and overweight, air pollution, high LDL cholesterol, kidney, alcohol use, and the list goes on. And the one thing that I want to point out, if you look at these, about 7 or 8 of these are nutrition related, meaning nutrition plays an important role in occurrence of these risk factors, which in turn lead to chronic illnesses that we talked about. And let me expand on that. Let me elaborate on the role that these different risk factors play in causation of chronic illnesses. So if you were to look at the chronic disease paradigm, this is what you would see. Most people die because of these conditions, as I said earlier, but they also, if they don't kill, they cause a lot of misery and pain. And here are some of those examples: chronic pain, arthritis, depression, dementia, and so on. If you were to take these individuals back retrospectively and try and understand the changes that they've gone through in their lives, namely weight gain, ongoing stress, cholesterol, glucose, gut flora, you will see that there is this relationship between these changes and occurrence of these illnesses. Well, let's not stop there. Let's go back even more back in terms retrospectively in terms of the changes that are brought about by factors. Here's a listing of those, I would say, unhealthy lifestyle factors, behavioral factors that are contributing to these changes, and these changes in turn resulting in illnesses that I referred to. An unhealthy diet is a very important component of those changes that we have been seeing. And all of this is not happening in vacuum. It's happening in a certain social, chemical, physical environment, and resulting in illnesses. We feel that, and as an example, that air pollution kills about 7 million people, as an example of what's going wrong with the environment, kills about 7 million people worldwide. And that's a disturbing trend. And we think that this paradigm, in fact, is happening as a result of inflammation that occurs in the human body. Now, even though we know that people are dying because of these illnesses, the real culprits or the killers are not heart disease, cancer, and diabetes that appear in the last column, but rather the unhealthy lifestyles that you saw in the first column. Dietary factors, social factors, and environmental factors. And so I think that it's important for us to understand that these killers are not the killers, but the real killers are what we saw in column, i.e. unhealthy lifestyle factors, including unhealthy nutrition. Now, I made a point about saying that this is all progressive in nature and inflammation plays an important role. And here's that appeared in Nature Medicine in 2019, explaining this complex relationship. And if you were to look at this, all these factors resulting in SCI, which is subclinical inflammation, and inflammation in turn resulting in all these chronic illnesses that I referred to earlier. And again, if you look at these 4 or 5 important factors of this list here, obesity, dysbiosis, diet, they are related to nutrition. And of course, since the focus of my talk is nutrition, I must say that nutrition, unhealthy diet, undesirable nutritional practice play a significant role in causation of inflammation, which in turn leads to all these chronic conditions. So let's look at the types of diets now, the diets that we all consume or have an interest in. And I Googled, and I basically came up with these 9 categories: belief-based diets, calorie weight control diets, vegetarian diets, diets for medical conditions, specific diets, I may refer to a couple of them, many commercial diets, crash diets, detox diets, fat diets, food-specific diets, and then many others. Now, if you were to look at this, and I counted, I could count more than 300 named diets that are available to us that people are using worldwide. So that then raises a question: with so many diets around, can we look at what might be a reasonably healthy diet? And that's my objective number 1, which is what I'm going to. A healthy diet, and this is what the US government said about 9 or 10 years ago, that these are the features of a healthy diet, and I'll quickly go through this. Healthy eating pattern is more important. If you have something once a month, that's not a big deal. It's the eating pattern, foods that we eat day in and day out. Moderate portions, extremely important characteristic of a healthy diet. Also, they should be plant-based, and protein should come from plants, vegetarian foods, also seafood, nuts, poultry, eggs, and so on. There should be also, we should rely on whole grains. At the same time, limiting refined carbohydrates, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Fat-free or low-fat dairy milk products, and emphasis on unsaturated fats rather than unsaturated fats. And trans fats is a big no. They are hydrogenated vegetable oils. They have health risks, serious health risks, and they're present mainly in a lot of commercial baked foods. And therefore, I think they should be eliminated. We should limit the amount of sodium we take. We also should limit the adding sugar to our coffee or to our tea. And we should also be careful that drinking caloric beverages such as sodas is not a desirable practice. And we should avoid ultra-processed foods. I'll spend a minute or two on ultra-processed foods toward the latter part of my discussion. And as I said earlier, there should be wholesomeness to our diet. So, for example, if somebody wants to increase their vitamin C intake, vitamin C is best from oranges, a whole fruit, rather than from a pill. So that's important. I want to mention one other point. Even though our discussion is about healthy diet, about healthy nutrition, but there is synergism between what we think is becoming very apparent, which is synergism between healthy diet and other lifestyle factors, namely sleep, healthy relationships, physical activity, stress management, and staying away from harmful substances such as tobacco. And those are the pillars of what is becoming known and well recognized specialty, namely lifestyle medicine. So if I had to summarize my thoughts, I would say a healthy diet is one which has plenty of plants and fruits, sufficient proteins. They should contain unprocessed foods, again, fruits and vegetables, or minimally processed foods. They should have saturated fats, less than 10% of calories coming from saturated. I would say no added sugars and limiting the sodium, and as I said earlier. And here are the other words that would describe a healthy diet: balance, variety, color, moderation, and taste. Taste not as in creamy taste, but taste may be related to spices, for example. So those would be some of the features of a healthy diet, simply put. So let's look at the evidence now, which is my objective number 2. What is the evidence that seems to suggest that there is a strong relationship between what we eat, nutrition, and chronic conditions? There have been many, many studies done, and Portfolio Diet, DASH Diet, Lion Diet Heart Study, suggesting a role of Mediterranean diet for prevention of coronary artery disease, Esselin-based diet, again for heart disease. The two diets that are receiving prominence and have received prominence, conspicuous prominence, are vegetarian diets and Mediterranean diet. And I want to spend a few minutes on those two kinds of diets, because I think they provide invaluable guidance to us in terms of controlling the kind of foods and nutrition that we consume. So this was a study that was published in 1999 and published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It was based on a sample size of 76,000 people. And these sample sizes came from 5 prospective studies, cohort studies, looked at the cardiovascular mortality rate in vegetarians as compared to non-vegetarians. Look at the amount of lower risk of CV mortality among those who were on lacto-ovo vegetarian diets and those who ate fish along with vegetarian diets as compared to those who were regular meat eaters, a 34% reduction. This study really raised everyone's eyebrows and said it seems as though there is some usefulness to vegetarian diets. And sure enough, as we begin to see, there is plenty of plenty of evidence that is emerging on the benefits of vegetarian vegan diets. And I want to also caution us that there are some drawbacks, and I'll talk about those in a minute or two. But generally speaking, prospective studies show vegetarian diets are associated with reduced risk of developing cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, hypertension, dementia, and cancer. Randomized control trials in which vegetarian diets have been used as interventions have confirmed that these diets prevent a wide range of chronic conditions, including diabetes, blood pressure, um, also reduced glycosylated HB, this A1C, an indicator of diabetes, and cholesterol. Now, that being said, a word of caution. Not all plant-based diets are equally healthy. There are unhealthy vegetarian diets which are poor in certain specific nutrients, namely vitamin B12, iron, zinc, and calcium. And again, I'll talk more about that in a second. If you had to classify vegetarian diets, you can look at them as healthy vegetarian diets, which is what most are: vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, and low-fat dairy products. On the right-hand side, we have examples of unhealthy vegetarian diets: refined carbohydrates, white bread that you buy in a market would be refined, is not healthy. Sweets and sugar-sweetened beverages, vegetarian ultra-processed foods that go through all kind of manufacturing industrial processes, and then trans fat and certain oils. And these are not good. They're unhealthy and can contribute to occurrence of chronic illnesses. So clearly, difference between healthy vegetarian on the one hand and unhealthy vegetarian on the other hand. And science has confirmed that the unhealthy vegetarian diets, including ultra-processed foods, increase the risk of diabetes, cardiovascular illnesses, and death rates. So that's a brief description of vegetarian diets. Let's move on to Mediterranean diet, which has been talked about a lot in the past 10 years. And many studies have confirmed the benefits, many innumerable benefits of Mediterranean diets. They reduce the risk of inflammation, sugar levels, and obesity, and in turn may reduce the risk of many chronic conditions. Well, what are the mechanisms? There may be several mechanisms, but one mechanism that keeps coming out, that is pointed out to in research studies, is the reduced oxidative stress associated with consuming Mediterranean diet. Now, if I use the word MD, I'm referring to Mediterranean diets. There is no one single MD. Let's be very careful. It's not one defined Mediterranean diet. But what I would say is there's a trend, and Mediterranean diets usually rely on consumption of whole grains, minimally processed foods, legumes, i.e. beans, lentils, fruits and vegetables, tree nuts, peanuts, fish, less meat, less sugar, less salt, and I would say almost no refined carbohydrates or less refined carbohydrates, and olive oil. There's a preference for olive oil in Mediterranean diets, and apparently there is some scientific merit to it, and I'll talk about that in a second and share with you a study that basically made that point. So here's the study. This is a famous, you've probably heard of the famous Spanish trial. It was a multi-center trial, and this was published in New England Journal of Medicine, in which over 7,000 people participated who were at high risk for cardiovascular risk, but did not have the disease, did not have any heart disease at the time of the enrollment. And what the authors did, what the researchers did, was they divided this into three groups: Mediterranean diets who were receiving Mediterranean diet and given extra virgin olive oil, then those who were given Mediterranean diet but with nuts, and the third group was the controlled diet group, meaning they were just given general guidance to reduce dietary fat, and in so saying and so recommending, they felt that this would be a great controlled diet. What did they find? a prospective study. People were followed over a period of 4 to 5 years. This is what they saw. The outcome was measured in terms of heart attack, myocardial infarction, stroke, or death from cardiovascular disease. Look at the data here. This is on the y-axis, you see the incidence of occurrence of these endpoints in controlled diet as compared to those who were receiving Mediterranean diet, either with nuts or with olive oil. Look at the difference. The controlled diet, much higher than the Mediterranean diet. What was intriguing about the study was actually stopped. It was supposed to go on, but it was stopped at 4.8 years after its onset. The reason was because the scientists who were in charge of the study felt that the benefit that people are receiving as a result of being on an MD diet is tremendous, and that it would be unfair for people who are enrolled in the control group that for them not to have the information that Mediterranean diet is useful. The study was stopped. Published, it was received worldwide, basically publicity, published in almost all major newspapers, making the point that there is value to Mediterranean diet. Now, as I said, remember I said I talked about this lifestyle medicine pillars, 6 of them, of which healthy eating is one of them. Now, if you were to combine healthy nutrition with the other 5 pillars, you see a tremendous amount of benefit. So the next few slides basically show us the evidence that supports the thought that there is synergism. If you were to combine healthy diet with other healthy practices, such as physical activity, staying away from harmful substances, you see a much greater effect. And this is Dean Ornish. You've heard of Dean Ornish, absolutely a great guy, a top-notch researcher worldwide, lives in California. And he published what became, I think, a very important study, Woke People Up, literally woke people up, documenting the value of lifestyle medicine in reducing the incidence and or mortality. And I'll talk about this and other studies in a second, the benefit of lifestyle changes. So he had 48 heart patients. They were divided into 2 groups, an intervention group called Intensive Lifestyle Changes, and they were put on a 10% fat whole foods vegetarian diet, aerobic activity, stress management training, smoking cessation, and psychosocial support for a period of 5 years. And again, a prospective cohort study. And this was compared with the usual care provided to these people by their doctors, called a control group. What did he see? This is a 5-year study. What you're looking at here, this is the intervention group, the lifestyle medicine group. This is the lumen of the coronary artery. Remember, this was about the heart disease. And this is year 1. This is the control group, about the same, I would say. And then at year 5, what did they see? There was widening of the lumen of the artery in the intervention lifestyle medicine group. In the control group, there was narrowing. These were people who were receiving the top-notch usual care. And also the complication rate was much higher in the control group as compared to the intervention lifestyle medicine group. And this is a quote from JAMA: more regression of coronary atherosclerosis seen in the intervention group than in the control group. And more than twice as many cardiac events occurred in the control group. Well, 1999, it made to a lot of great papers documenting that there is value to lifestyle medicine, and clearly unhealthy diet in his group that received lifestyle medicine, unhealthy diet as compared to healthy diet was one component. This was a study that was published in New England Journal of Medicine. And basically what they did was they looked at the occurrence of diabetes among those who were pre-diabetics and wanted to see if there was any reduction in people who received diet and exercise, so exercise in addition to the diet, and compared that with metformin and placebo. What did they see? 3 years later, the reduction was 58% in the diet and exercise, i.e., lifestyle medicine group, as compared to the medication, namely metformin group, documenting that in this study, diet and exercise played a much bigger role in terms of reducing diabetes as compared to the medication that patients were taking. Well, honestly, the research hasn't stopped. And this is the Lancet, 2017. And still, there are many, many studies. I just want to share with you some illustrations, which basically are making a very important point. Then, when you bring in diet, along with other practices, lifestyle medicine practices, you see fantastic results. And this was a study that was published in the Lancet. And I think in this study, what they did, they were asking a question. Is it possible to bring about remission of diabetes? And what they looked at was 300 and over 300 individuals who suffered from diabetes, and they were divided into two groups: a control group receiving best practices, best medication, and so on, and compare that with a lifestyle medicine group receiving, and there was a stepped up food reintroduction, they were put on a diet replacement, and also given psychosocial support. What did they see? Well, at 12 months, a 46% remission in those who received the diet and the support. And as compared to 36%, it went down a bit at 24 months. But the point that the authors made was that you can achieve a substantial remission of diabetes if they are put on those lifestyle medicine interventions. And I think the data is there. We need to do more experiments, see if there are ways and means we can bring about remission in diabetics. And also if there are ways and means to lessen the load of medication that diabetics are receiving. And I think there's a lot of data that is beginning to support the very useful role that lifestyle medicine, specifically nutrition, can play in controlling diabetes. Now, if I were to put all that together and ask the question, what impact is healthy diet consumption having on Homo sapiens in terms of mortality? And as I said, this hasn't stopped. This is the Lancet Commission report that appeared in the Lancet in 2019. What did the report say? Well, this is what the report said. This is 2019, that planetary health diet, which is plant-based and supports environmental sustainability and is culture and community specific, and that emphasizes foods such as fish, vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, and nuts. If people were to subsist on such a diet, you would see a result that's phenomenal. You will have prevented 11 million deaths on an annual basis. Of all the deaths that occur on this planet, about 11 million deaths will be reduced. And I will say this to you, that the research is going on and the Lancet hasn't stopped. The work of this commission hasn't stopped. This is their report in 2025. Basically making the same points. They've added bits and pieces to it. And those are whole food, minimally processed foods that are plant sourced, basically saying the same thing again. Primarily unsaturated fats, small amounts of added sugar. It's a good idea not to add extra sugar to your coffee or to your tea, and incorporating fish, seafood, and reducing meat. Now, all of this within planetary boundaries. As you know, there's a lot of discussion on climate, the environment that we live in, and also the inequities. And they also emphasize, they talk about unhealthy diet and healthy diet, but they go beyond that in terms of looking at food and nutrition from an ecological perspective. And look at the numbers. They've revised their numbers. If we were to subsist or follow this approach, we could avert not 11, 12 million, but 15 million deaths. So, folks, to me, the evidence is very powerful and translates into reducing a lot of this premature mortality to the extent of 15 million worldwide. I think to me is great, absolutely. Now, is there confusion in the whole field of nutrition? And you probably would know this. We all we Google stuff, and we see there is all kind of conflicting information. And I will tell you, more so in nutrition than in other areas of medicine. And this confusion is resulting in controversies, myths, and so on and so forth. And that being said, for us as healthcare practitioners, there is plenty of decent evidence which is available to us that we can use in our practices and in public health programs, and hopefully also to address some of the confusion and controversies that are occurring. So no doubt there is confusion, and nutrition is surrounded by confusion, and there's some ambiguity. But as I say, there is also decent evidence and some of the points that can be helpful to us as practitioners, whether you're in public health or a clinician, that can guide us in providing appropriate recommendations to our patients. And I would suggest, and again, these are guiding principles. I don't have the time to go into the details, but I will share with you some of my thoughts on what might be a reasonable way to integrate nutrition in our settings, in our clinical and public health settings. It is imperative that we understand the suffering and the problem that the community or the patient presents to us. So evaluation is important. Taking history is important. Understanding lifestyles of people who are suffering is important. Examination is important, and maybe running some tests is important. The second point I want to make is that in helping our patients or community, I think it is very, very important to rely on what we call as a patient-centered approach. That means you are treating a person with a problem, then treating a problem in that person. So if you're treating, for example, obesity, it is important for us to treat a person with obesity, then treat obesity in that person. If you see there's a difference between those two situations. And for the simple reason that in nutrition, and this is true even for medical practice, one size fits all approach does not apply. And certainly not in nutrition. So for those of you who provide nutritional guidance and advice to your patients, one size fits all approach does not apply. It has to be patient-centered. The third point that I want to make is, it is very, very important for us to work with our patient having built what I call as a therapeutic bond that relies on some of these things, these other principles, sharing and partnership building approach with your patients. Simple examples. Is there anything you would like to tell me, Mr. or Mrs. Patient? Is there anything you want to ask me? Raise questions, open up things. What do you think makes you gain weight? Well, the patient might say, Doc, you're the doctor, I've come to you. You tell me, well, why am I putting on weight? Well, but asking a question is respecting patient. You're building a very important therapeutic bond with your patients. What might help you? Well, again, you're the doctor. You will tell me what might help me. But having asked those questions is bringing you closer to your patients, helping you build a bond that you need to do it. Empathy and compassion are important. And more importantly, communication. And if I had to use some words to describe communication that it relies on, listen to your patients, not hear, listen. Make eye contact. Don't argue. Sometimes, as they say, roll with the resistance. And use the language that patients will understand, please. We cannot talk to them in high bombastic medical language. You have to speak to your patients in the language that they will understand. Sometimes providing numbers and statistics from a trusted source can be helpful. And here's an example that I share with you that appeared in New England Journal of Medicine. So whether you're talking to an audience or to a patient, reduce the cognitive burden. Don't make things complicated for them. Don't expect them to do the math as they listen to you. They will not. They are the ones, they are patients. They are the ones who are in pain. They are the ones who are suffering. So, for example, instead of saying there was an increase of death rate due to saturated fats by 50%, can you or I say where 100 people were dying before, now that number is 150? What's a big deal? Make it simple. Speak to them in the language that they understand. Here's another one. There's a condition called myocardial ischemia. It's a heart attack. So can we to patients say that, look, your heart is suffering from lack of oxygen rather than using the word ischemia? Please, let's do that. People find it particularly easy to ignore health information that is far from their own experiences. If they haven't gone through anything, they'll never understand that. I think sometimes telling stories that may relate to such patients or an experience that you as a practitioner might have had could be extremely helpful. Here's another principle. I think nutrition success or nutrition practice, its results, they depend on achieving a certain threshold in its maintenance. People, if they are told to do certain things, if they adhere to them, they're more likely to see success. And if adherence is measured, if this is a scale of adherence, and if this is the change in weight gain, this is a study that was performed, published in the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine, you can see if the adherence score was higher, the weight loss was much greater. So adhering to an intervention, adhering to certain things that the doctor tells you becomes important for those patients. And I like this. This is what appeared in Washington Post. Our health, and it said our health isn't all determined by these big moments. It is determined by innumerable, many micro decisions that each one of us makes on a daily basis. And I like what it said. So while infrequent use of red meat at breakfast may be okay, once a fortnight, once every 2 weeks, once a week, a lifetime of eating processed meats can tip the scale between colon cancer and health. And that is extremely important. More so in nutrition and consumption of certain food items. And this is a great example. So the author writes, one patient, this is a doctor writing, one patient of mine agreed to adopt his relative's dog 3 years ago, mainly because he felt lonely and wanted companionship. Despite being a self-described couch potato, he's been easily hitting the recommended physical activity guidelines every week because he started taking his dog for runs around the neighborhood. In addition to the mental health benefits that this person received, he's no longer pre-diabetic. This may seem very trivial, but look at the impact that it's having on this person. This is Japanese, makes the point that it's importance of smaller steps. Look at the two ladders, somebody smaller steps all the way at the top, and this person is still down there. This approach embraces small improvements. A typical patient might say, I eat right, I exercise enough, I do everything right, and yet nothing happens. Well, a reminder that excellence isn't the result of talent alone. It's a sum of small daily choices that we make. And there was a great write-up in New York Times on this, and I would suggest even small things, capitalizing on them, building patients' confidence or the confidence of community is absolutely a step in the right direction. So incorporating clinical nutrition, and I want to share with you some of the pearls, and I'll go through them quickly. Of course, healthy diet is important. We talked about the principles. Discussion, counseling, and behavior therapies are effective depending upon your practice and the kind of patients you see. And in these discussions, some of the following points come up. The role of anti-inflammatory foods. Alcohol, what do we know about alcohol? Vitamin, mineral supplements, do we need to use them? And addressing common nutrition myths. Here's a healthy diet, I spoke about that. And if your patient asks you what kind of food should you eat, if you want to make it simple, in your plate, half of it should be fruits and vegetables, and the remaining divided between 2 portions, grains and proteins. Foods that fight inflammation, and perhaps you may want to keep that in mind, are fruits, vegetables, fish, extra virgin oil, olive oil, garlic, turmeric, avocados, walnuts, and cinnamon. And these are the other foods, ultra processed foods, that actually cause inflammation. We want to tell our patients to stay away from them. And ultra processed foods are, in fact, inappropriate. Their use is I wouldn't use the word dangerous, but they are associated with many, many illnesses. And it is clear, and here are examples of that: supermarket bread, ready meals, breakfast cereals, cakes, chips, and all of those are ultra processed foods and associated with occurrence of chronic illnesses. And here's a table that shows you an increase in these chronic illnesses as a result of consuming ultra processed foods. Taken together, these findings support the thesis that the ultra processed dietary pattern is a major driver of the escalating global burden of chronic diseases. And I think we need to pay attention. We need to take actions that will promote diets that are based on whole foods and discourage the use of processed foods. A lot of talk about alcohol. Going back 4 or 5 years ago, people thought, well, 1 or 2 drinks a day might help. Folks, I will say to you that alcohol does not promote health in any way. And if you were to, this is a study that was published in JAMA not too long ago, that as you go up with the use of alcohol, the risk may be minimal to begin with, but it still increases. And then, of course, there's an exponential increase in occurrence, in this case, of hypertension and coronary artery disease. And the light alcohol consumption, which was associated with benefit, actually happened, as this one says, as a result of confounding lifestyle factors. So any amount of alcohol, in fact, this is what WHO said in 2023, the health risks associated with alcohol are serious. There is no safe amount. In fact, they went on to say that the risks start from the first drop of alcohol consumption, WHO 2023. I don't want to spend too much time on this. A lot of people are taking supplements. This was a great write-up in JAMA that appeared in June of 2024. And the point that they made was that investigations have shown that there's no reduction in mortality as a result of consuming nutrition supplements. But keeping in mind that in these studies, benefits of certain supplements were not brought up. So, for example, older individuals who might be taking other medications and whom nutrients absorption may be impaired, they could benefit from it. Also, we know that certain minerals and vitamins can be helpful in reducing progression of age-related macular degeneration. We know folic acid is helpful to people who are pregnant, and those with deficiencies can certainly benefit from supplement. But I'll tell you this, that there are a lot of risks associated with consumption, particularly excessive quantities of supplements. And a case in point is an increased risk of lung cancer in smokers. Iron may increase the risk of iron load, which is associated with increased risk of dementia and diabetes. So here's a scientific consensus on micronutrients. I'm referring to nutrition supplements other than those people who may benefit. As I said earlier, there is little health rationale for the use of multivitamin supplements. Micronutrients come most healthfully from food sources. Best to get them from real food. When supplementation is required, it can often be limited to micronutrients, i.e. deficiency states in question. So I will not go into the myths and wind up by saying that healthy diet principles are captured in the following words: moderation, variety, wholesomeness, plant-based and optimum balance of macro and micronutrients, avoidance of ultra-processed foods, added sugar and salt, and certainly bring in synergism, healthy eating habits along with other things. And as Michael Pollan said, and I like this quote, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And this is what Hippocrates said: if he could give every individual the right amount of nourishment and exercise, not too little and not too much, we would have found the safest way to health. This was true many, many, many years ago. It was true then, it's true today. And basically, that's what I want to share with you. I want to thank you for listening to me, and I'll be glad to take any questions that you might have. So thank you. Thank you, Raji.
Thank you, Dr. Mamtani, for such an insightful presentations. We have many comments on the chat and thanking you. Excellent presentation. Very lovely talk. So a lot of comments there thanking you.